Well, welcome everybody back to IAG Trade Talk. I'm your host, Andrew Scott, and today we're joined by Jason Ader, Chairman and CEO of 26 Acquisition Corp. Welcome to Trade Talk, Jason.
See you again, Andrew.
It's great to see you too, and I definitely do want to get on to the merger between Okada Manila and 26 Acquisition Corp. But first, of course, we've got to talk about what happened over there at Okada Manila. I mean, regular readers of IAG and will know that there's been quite a saga going on. Perhaps in your own words, I mean, what happened?
Well, I think everybody's read what happened. It's unfortunate. I think, the regulators and some law enforcement in the Philippines were misled. They're all good people and hardworking. And I think, we now have a new government and we have a new president. We have a new head of PAGCOR. My sense, in direct and indirect discussions with the leadership of the country and regulators is that Philippines wants to become a premier gaming, lodging, leisure, hospitality destination worldwide. And they're very focused on business integrity. They're very focused on attracting American and Western capital. And I view, what happened as something that's in our rearview mirror now, a bit of a speed bump, unfortunate, but on the right path. And I'm happy for Universal, and it's exciting for our merger as well.
Jason, you and I get on pretty well, but I'm not going to let you off the hook quite that easily. I mean, it was pretty outrageous scenes, violence, pushing, shoving. I mean, we all saw those videos, and Mr. Okada obviously did everything he could do to get control, and there was quite a war of words backwards and forwards. They were putting press releases out. You guys were putting press releases out, and we had to refer to the two boards, a Trowell-backed board and a Okada-backed board. I mean, that must have been, I mean, how did you react when that first happened? And how did that make you feel about investing in that property and just seeing those sort of scenes can't be good for any businessman in terms of business confidence and certainty and that sort of thing?
Yes. Well, so on that point, one of my objectives in our merger is to really work, with leaders in the Philippines on improving, the perception and helping Western investors, gaming industry investors like myself, really understand the positives, that are market, the growth in visitation, the potential tourism demand, the significant juxtaposition now that exists between Philippines and Macau, and the potential that has for investors to create significant long-term shareholder value. That being said, the headlines and the videos do portray, a risk that, in my view, has been virtually unprecedented. Really was 30 years as an investor in the gaming industry. So it's not what I wanted to see. I think it was unfortunate. This is a company, Universal is a company, that's had a dispute with Kazuo Okada now for half a decade. And so this is a bit of a skirmish related to a much longer term war, if you will. And everybody today has a camera wherever they are. So the camera images do get disproportionate amount of attention as a result of everybody having iPhones and Androids in their hand. The reality is, if you were at the property when this was happening, you probably had no idea that what we saw on video was even going on. It's just that we all, as gaming industry members, focused on the video. There's great employees at the Okada Manila facility. I've gotten to know quite a few of them, and I'm excited to get to know them better. We have spectacular leadership, led by Byron Yip. Universal's management team in Japan also is, I think, done an incredible job working to try to keep things together for their shareholders, and looking forward to being their partner.
Well, as you say, we did hear that too. You know, people who were staying at the property were totally unaware of what was going on, and then they see the video and they amazing! Didn't even realise that was happening, and it did seem to be from the outside perception very much business as usual, whether it was Group A or Group B that were running things. But anyway, let's move on from that. So, well, one thing that's a little bit related to that, where we will get where we want to go eventually, is just the name of the property. I've always wondered about it being called Okada Manila. It caused a lot of confusion, and there was even I remember slogging through one press conference where the org chart went up, the company org chart, and it was all explained. And I won't embarrass the executive involved, but I remember some years ago sitting down with an executive there saying, you guys really probably should think about changing the name. And the comment came back, well, it would cost a lot because you'd have to buy all new chips. And I said, I think you should still consider making that investment. I bet you're thinking about that now. I mean, what's the future of the name of Okada Manila? Would you be looking at changing the name to get away from that Okada name?
Well, of course, this is a decision, that Universal needs to make. And I think, I'm just one voice at the table, a significant minority voice, but my significant minority voice would be very much in favor of changing the name at this point. But ultimately that's a decision that would need to be made by Universal. I support it either way, but for all the reasons that we've talked about, it does make sense. To play devil's advocate, though, there's two beautiful facilities in Las Vegas, still called the Wynn, and still doing great. But I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about naming and the cost of changing the name in future board meetings.
Sure. And sorry to belabor the point, but just one last thing on this is obviously Kazuo Okada is still actually chairman and CEO and is still on the board. Any thoughts on that?
For now. Still on the board for now.
We'll leave it at for now. So let's move on a little bit of operation stuff. So obviously in that period, that disruptive period, probably operations got a little messed up. There was talk of money being taken out of the cage, that sort of thing. Is there any estimate of any amount that's gone south, or what's the recovery trajectory look like?
Well, we read all the reports. Nobody has really accurate information. Byron, was back, leading the property, and the finance teams and the external accounting teams are beginning the process to assess that information, but we just don't have a true answer to report at this point. It's obviously something that we'll get down to the bottom of exactly what went on. It just requires third-party experts to come in and review it with the very skilled finance team led by Hans van der Sand, who I know has been extraordinarily busy over the last several months, as you can imagine.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's talk about the merger. The SPAC merger between 26 Capital and I think UE Resorts it's going to be. Tell us a little bit about, is that on track? What's the timeline on that? And what's the plan moving forward for that?
Well, both parties are still very committed to that merger. Universal just said in the press release put out over the last few days that the plan is to move forward with the NASDAQ listing by the end of the year. We're pushing hard together to, fulfill that objective. Obviously, the ownership in this transaction has never really been an issue. We know there's approximately 4 billion shares of Okada Manila owned by Universal. The real issue was management dispute that does seem to be, well on its way to being rectified. And so we're looking forward to the partnership and the merger, which will showcase really the premier integrated resort in the Philippines to U.S. investors. And what I think is, despite, the skirmish that we've all seen the videos of, the Philippines is standing out now as I think the most exciting gaming market in Asia. It's just the numbers. When we originally announced this deal, there was still some COVID and pandemic uncertainty, but the financial results, the visitation, table game play, slot play, room demand. I mean, it's noteworthy and it's exciting. And I think U.S. investors will like learning about this market and over time deploying more capital, as they see the financial results.
Well, we're certainly seeing the center of gravity of the Asian gaming industry, move not entirely to the Philippines, but there's certainly a wave in that direction. Suppliers are putting more employees over there. Numbers are coming back. We're hearing that slot play and mass play is coming back quicker. Of course, it'll take longer for any sort of international play to come back, but the Koreans are already coming back to the Philippines. And while Macau languishes in a really difficult situation, we're hearing that pretty much every other market in Asia is back strongly. Singapore is back strongly. Australia is back strongly. And I'm looking forward to getting over to the Philippines soon and seeing what's going on over that. So that's great. Talk a little bit about how do you see the recovery, the post-COVID recovery, the trajectory of that back to 2019 levels and then beyond, particularly in the Philippines? How do you see that tracking forward over the next 6, 12, 18 months?
Well, I think by 2024, so next year will continue to be a recovery year, and I think you'll see some more movement, as it relates to Chinese play. But as we look into 2023, with continued trajectory will be up but by then 2024, I think we'll have peak levels in the Philippines in terms of total size of the market and levels of profitability. And if you look at 2019 as the peak level thus far, I mean, Okada Manila really was 60% complete. There was still construction disruption on the property. Now, of course, you sort of fast forward, the property is virtually complete. It's really a standout integrated resort, one that if it were placed in Las Vegas or if it were placed in Macau, I think would be one of the best integrated resorts in either market. And that didn't really exist completely in 2019. So now you have this powerful engine of tourism, plus the fact that it's hard to get to Macau. Macau has, got, quarantine issues, visa issues. I think that, the freedom of travel in the Philippines is going to be a huge competitive advantage. So as I look forward 12, 18 months and we get into 2024, it should be extraordinary. I mean, I'm really excited about it. And, there's other things I want our combined company, with Universal, to be focused on around the region, as I see the potential for, really high returns on capital and the potential to really drive stockholder returns. And the obvious competitive advantage that we'll have is that we're in the market with the premier integrated resort.
What about higher end play? As we saw recoveries in the US and in other places around the world, it was the local play that came back first, and people didn't want to travel. Then domestic travel started, and then international travel. We haven't really seen international travel too much yet in Asia. We're lagging behind the rest of the world in terms of a post-COVID recovery. But how do you think, there's a couple of things at play here, isn't there? There's the sort of the change in China's posture towards their players playing overseas. So whereas before the pandemic, China was seen as the great engine, the great feeder market for high-end play, whether it be junket VIP or even just premium mass play, but now that's become quite problematic. How do you see that playing out, particularly in the Philippines, where you've got Korean market feeding, Japan market feeding? How do you think VIP comes back for a property like Okada Manila in due course?
So obviously the focus, going back to even when I was a board member at Las Vegas Sands, was on the differentiated and I think better business in the mass and premium mass sector. I think this is sort of conceptually an area where CEO Byron Yip and I, have a very aligned perspective. I much prefer the mass and premium mass business. I think it's a deep market, in the Philippines, and so that will be, and that will continue to be a core area of focus. As you think about the high end and sort of the role, history of junket play, and the fact that that junket intermediary is really no longer a factor. I do think it's premature to write the obituary for high-end play. In fact, this is gaming demand that will absolutely positively find its way back into the Philippines and into Macau. It's just going to come a different way. It's not going to disappear. It's, obviously China's a very big country. There's, hundreds of millions of gaming customers. And so it's going to be fascinating to see how the high-end play, reemerges, but it's not going to go away. And the fact that the junkets, to a large extent have been neutralized, there will be gaming at the high end, as sure as I'm sitting here, that will come directly to the properties. And it should be, in my view, quite substantial over the next 24 to 36 months. I think we'll start to see that business come back.
Well, those high-end players that have been to Macau, to use Macau as the example, they know the buildings, they know the brands, so they're going to find it one way or another. I'm interested in your view. I'm asking a lot of people about this. How do you think let's call it the demise of Macau for now, may not, as you say, let's not write the obituary, but certainly it's crippled badly right now. How do you think that affects the dynamics of the whole Asian market? You could sort of think of Macau as the sun of the solar system, and then all these planets sort of going around it. That really was, Macau at its peak, 39, 40 billion GGR. The second tier, 3, 4, 5 billion. Very, very big difference. But with Macau now dropping down to 10 or even less billion, how does that affect? That demand's got to go somewhere. Is that going underground? Is that going into other gaming? Is that going online? How do you think that affects the overall market dynamics of the region?
Yeah, so there's billions and billions and billions of dollars being made in online gaming, and this dark grade of black market gaming in Asia, and everybody knows it. And you can just sort of see the flow of funds, and you could even see some public companies that choose to be in that business. So that's unfortunate. That's been the history of the gaming industry. When it's legalized and it's available, it's great, and the government knows what's going on and has the benefit of taxing it. When there's constraints to publicly available regulated gaming, it tends to find other ways, and it's just so easy. When the server blocking in China is easily circumvented via VPN. Anybody can do it. It's not complicated. And so that's the unfortunate thing for Macau, is that there still is a significant amount of gambling happening. It's on MacBook Pros and on mobile phones, and it'd be great to see it get back into regulated and taxed environment for the good of the employment economy. That in the end, it's hurting people's jobs and people's livelihoods. Obviously there are employees working in the online gaming companies, and there's live dealer streams. But for the travel, tourism, and hospitality industry, and those that studied in school how to be expert, in those particular areas and have years of experience, they deserve to have gaming come back into a live environment. In hotels and integrated resorts in Macau, with all the infrastructure that exists, around the market and the Philippines. So as you know, I've been a big proponent of online gambling. I've had investments in Playtech and bwin and PokerStars, and I like the business still going forward. But I never expected the Asian business to be as big as it is today, because Macau never really opened. And that's ultimately what's happened as a result. And it's unfortunate.
Yeah, well, there are plenty of people out there estimating the Asian online business as bigger than Macau ever got. It could be 50 billion. It could be more. Nobody really, as you say, nobody really knows. So just let me indulge me to go off on a tangent based on your answer there for a second. Are you being a proponent there of trying to get that play into the regulated live bricks and mortar environment, or are you saying that Asian governments should look at regulating online gaming? Philippines has gone a bit of a way down that way with the pogos and the so-called pigo environment. It's not perfect, but it's the best we've got in Asia. Are you saying that that's something that governments in Asia should be looking at?
I think in 2022, the model is hybrid. I mean, and obviously one of the biggest and most successful companies in the world is Walmart. Everybody knows, the biggest retailer. They went online to compete with Amazon and have an amazing bricks and mortar business and an amazing online business, and they work well together and they can touch their consumers all the time. One of the things that stood out to me during the pandemic is that many of the gaming companies just had no way of connecting with their customers because there was no online business. So I do think that there needs to be a hybrid approach to any gaming company to have online business and a land-based business. But I think the better experience is the experience in Macau, the experience in Okada Manila, the experience in Las Vegas and a property, like the Wynn Resort or the Venetian. Being in a casino, being around entertainment, having great food and beverage, being around friendly employees is an amazing vacation. And it's a great place to do business, and the conventions and meetings and the contacts and networking that comes, around, the locations where casinos exist is just hard to duplicate. During the pandemic, people would say, "Oh, no, nobody's going to go to the Consumer Electronics Show again." Well, I guarantee, the Consumer Electronics Show will exceed its best days ahead of us, not behind us, because everybody wants to be together and they want to do it in a place that's fun, like Las Vegas or Macau, and eventually Manila, Singapore. What a great place to have business meetings and also to travel for vacation. So I'm for that model growing, but I do think there needs to be legalized and regulated online gaming too, because that we're in a technology oriented world, and it's 2022 and everybody has a phone in their hand or a computer on their desk, but they also like to go to the markets where world-class integrated resorts exist.
Sure. Well, we've just seen it. G2E Asia and Singapore was popular. We were down at AGE in Australia, very popular. People are excited to be shaking hands and meeting each other again in person. But as you say, also, the online hybrid, we're seeing it in the US, BetMGM, and we're seeing the bricks and mortar get together. We're seeing companies like Bally that are in both spaces. Look, just one last question back to the Philippines. Competition's really starting to hot up in the Philippines. You've got the Entertainment City properties, Soler's building Soler North. There's a Soler South that's on the way in Cavite. We're seeing Mr. Hans on the cover of IAG in September issue. He's built what he's built up there in Clark, and the new airport in Clark, and where I'm heading, even Cebu, New Star, places like that. There's obviously more and more properties, and perhaps under this new president, people are saying this will be a more business-oriented environment and more opportunities could occur. Are you worried about cannibalization or saturation? Are you worried about too many properties opening and becoming a hyper-competitive environment in the Philippines over time?
So I've seen all the projects, that have been announced and maybe, under consideration. Certainly Cebu is a beautiful location and one that, could stand and grow. Some of the Soler expansion proposals are small relative to, building like the Okada Manila. So I think, the market has room to grow. There is a Philippine local market, and there's a international travel and tourist market in the Philippines. I still think we're at the point, it's a bit of a cliche but I believe it in gaming. If you build a project good enough, people will come. If you build it, people will come. The Philippines is starting to see that. I mean, Okada Manila is that type of engine, and it never really opened fully complete before the pandemic. Now the pandemic has ended or is ending. We're in the very, very last stage of people having constraints on travel. And wow, I mean, people are coming, and there's nothing like it in the market. And if there was another property like it, or two or three, I mean, I would root for their success. I'm rooting for Bloomberry and Soler to do well, because the better they do, the more people who come to the market, I think, the more growth there will be. I mean, people were afraid of competition in Atlantic City. A lot of properties got built, same in Las Vegas, same in Macau. And I think, it's still the region, the Asian region is still supply constrained. And so the only obstacle is sort of the country and the government and the regulator itself. And so, and I've explained this to them that they really have a gold mine that they're sitting on right now. And I think they recognize it. And I'm just really encouraged, by the recent activity by Pat Gore and by new president, Marcos. They get it, and they want to see gaming grow. They want to see American capital come into the market, and they do want to create a world-class, not just gaming, but gaming, hospitality, travel, tourism destination. And this could be the decade of the Philippines, in my view.
That's fantastic. Well, Jason, thank you so much for speaking to the readers and the viewers of IAG. It's great to have you on the show, and hopefully we can enjoy a nice cold beer at Okada Manila sometime soon.
Sounds great, Andrew. We look forward to it.
And we'll see all of you next time on IAG Trade Talk. Bye for now.